Our next conversation is going to be about promoting youth, women, and persons with disability participation in governance and electoral processes. It's a big conversation because we have to talk about inclusion in everything, all aspects of our governance. We are joined by two people in the studio. Purity Jebor is an advocate for gender justice and youth rights, and DanPaul Andegah is a civil education educator at URAIA. Good morning, DanPaul and Purity.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
call those the hot seats of the situation room. How does it feel, Purity?
Relaxed, chilled.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's always the idea. Make yourself comfortable, sit back, relax, enjoy the flight for the next 50 minutes or so. Okay?
Yes.
Today's Proverb City.
From the Republic of Zambia. You have to look after wealth, but knowledge looks after you.
You have to look after wealth, but knowledge looks after you. DanPaul, what do you think this proverb is telling us?
True. I mean, like Prophet Hosea for those who believe in the Bible says, his people are perishing for lack of something. So it's true. Yeah.
Knowledge.
Yeah.
Knowledge is important.
Yeah.
Wealth is important, but knowledge is important.
Knowledge is critical.
Okay. Purity, what's your interpretation?
I think knowledge will make you relevant and be sustainable as you live. But wealth, as we all know, we say wealth is vanity, so it might disappear at any moment, at any time, but knowledge will keep you going.
That's very true. Siti, it's your verdict?
You know, they have put it well. Hosea 4:6, as he puts it, says exactly that. What I find interesting, though, is that people understand the concept, but how often do we put this concept into practice? Because we understand it, and we can explain, and we can give detailed explanations and examples, but how often do we actually put it into practice? And if you look at our nation, do you think that we have a nation of people who pursue knowledge, or do we have a nation of people who pursue wealth?
I think we have no knowledge of what knowledge means.
Yeah.
It starts from there. What is knowledge? Do we have a universal understanding of knowledge? That's another philosophical conversation that you will take us through another day, City. First, let's get to understand what is URAIA. Tunajua raia ni citizen. URAIA ni citizen.
It's good to imagine URAIA ni citizen. But URAIA, first of all, Ura Trust is a non-state actor, a national civic education platform. Ura Trust has been around for quite a while, and mainly to give education about rights and responsibilities to the common mwananchi. And they have done that pretty well. Every time there is an issue on governance, an issue on participation, URAIA has been on the forefront to give information, relevant information, using the Constitution to the members of the public. And so URAIA has several programs. URAIA runs a program on civic education. So yes, you are educated about your rights, and so what? So it has another program on civic engagement, so that the rights, now that you have rights, so how do you engage using those rights? And finally, also URAIA has a program on gender mainstreaming. What do we do with our gender? You know, so it is key. But for purposes of today, we imagine that why have we failed in the two? We have the knowledge, we want to practice that effectively, but why don't we do that? So the U2, you know, the respect, the you are because I am, that part is lacking. And because it is lacking, the conversation today is to engage further. What is it we can do? And more specifically, using the SIG, you know, the special interest groups. What is it that is missing? Where is the missing link in the performance or effective participation of this group in governance? Yes.
So when you talk about now inclusion of these particular groups, in many ways we call them vulnerable, marginalized, right?
Yeah.
Is it looking at youth, women, persons with disability, and their participation in governance, and particularly in electoral processes? Every time in the election cycle, we look at, okay, so how many women are there? In the last election, for example, Purity, you remember that the IEBC had to send political parties back and tell them, look, your list of nominees, not just for nomination to appointment after the election, but nomination in the election, has got to have to show the inclusion. Are we making strides? Have we made any strides that can be commendable?
Yeah, I'm at 50%. Because immediately after the elections, what really happened? We need an audit report from the political parties to mention the strategies that they are now putting in place to ensure that this scenario does not repeat itself, but also for the registrar of political parties to have an accountability mechanism to continue fast-tracking and working with the political parties. Because what DanPaul has said about gender mainstreaming in electoral processes, it has to be very intentional, because many other times when you speak about gender, people say that you're talking about wanawake. Who said gender is about wanawake? Gender is about how you've been structured, how you've been socialized to live with people or even within a community. And so you'll find the same characters or the social norms that you left your village with is what you're bringing into the political party scenario. But if your community had this designed place for women and youth, that is the same culture that we will see in the political parties. So actually what we see in the political parties is about our social structure, how again we have been nurtured. So I think we need an audit report post the election that we need to see how far this is. The second bit is the fast tracking in terms of the legal frameworks. We now have a conversation around the 2/3 gender bill. And that is a formula that is going to be very instrumental, not just for the political parties, but to also ensure all the government institutions are also adhering to that formula. And I think this will really hit hard the political parties, because now they have to adhere to that. But I'm looking at it even in terms of the organogram or the power dynamics within their political parties. Who are calling the shots, they're actually men. So if this 2/3 gender rule is going to be applied, how are we going to see that context looking like? So there is some progress that Kenya is making, but we need to be more intentional moving forward.
When we look at the electoral process, what are we talking about here? Are we talking about the activity of voting? Are we talking about the civic education around the process? Are we talking about involvement in the process, putting myself up for candidacy, for example? Or are we talking about an all-encompassing activity of all of these things? What are we talking about?
It's holistic. Everything that you said, it's actually involved at different stages of the electoral process.
Right.
So where I think DanPaul will come in handy around the civic education. But me as Purity, if I want to vote, that is also part of the electoral process.
Yeah.
I have to know when the the party primaries are being held. And it is not just before election. We just had 2 months ago, UDA was doing their party primaries. How many women were aware of these, or how many youth actually did take part in this process? So that we place ourselves at a strategic position. We don't come into the party primaries in 2026, but we come in as early as the leadership elections is actually happening. But the actual voting is also part of the involvement that we also we are supposed also to take part during the electioneering cycle.
Okay, can I call you Don P as well? It just okay.
If you have that.
Thank you. So this is the thing. I think that's great what Purity has just said, that it's not just when an election is coming up, but in my mind, there has to be a constant immersion in the whole process so that folks are understanding what's going on. So even if you're on the other side of leadership, that you're involved in a process, whether it's public participation that just came to an end concerning the finance bill, whether it's public participation when it involves county budgets, whether it's public participation or even civic education and knowledge and learning about, so what does a member of a county assembly do? What does a member of parliament do? What does a senator do? What does a member of parliament do? What does, a governor do? Citizen-led governance, I think, is huge. But the question is, what are some of the activities then that would activate? Because unfortunately, we're in a place whereby political parties will involve women, they will involve youth, they will involve persons living with disabilities to fill a quota, not necessarily because they understand the importance of an all-rounded representation. So what's being done to make sure that it is beyond a, what is that thing they call box-ticking, checkbox exercise?
So, okay, first of all, I want Kenyans to understand that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 is very clear. And when you look at the Article number 1 of this Constitution, it talks about sovereignty of power. The sovereign power belonging to the people of Kenya. And I actually don't like using the people of Kenya. I would love to say that sovereign power belongs to me as a Kenyan, and you as a Kenyan, irrespective of race, irrespective of your ability to speak, irrespective of your status in life. That power, you have it inherently. The Constitution goes further, sub-article 1 and 2, how that same power can be used. Direct or indirectly, it goes further to say that. So it does not stop at when it has got to be used. It says when it should be used. So ideally, every Kenyan should use that power with background knowledge on how it should benefit him and brother. I say this with a lot of sincerity, that we tend to imagine that power is only used during voting, and that's it. I don't think that should be the case. Voting is only a section of how you can use that power to change your life. But okay, if you are able to vote in good leaders, what informs us who a good leader is? Article 73 speaks about leadership and integrity. So in civic education, we speak to it. We tell people who a good leader should be. Article 10 speaks about the values that leader should bring on board, including but not limited to inclusivity, public participation, the rule of law, and issues like that. So it is very clear what a leader should have before even we elect them. The problem is how comes it doesn't appear to be the case after the deal has been done? How comes it doesn't appear to be the case? And now, for purposes of today, the political actors, like Puri said here, in fact, looking at the gender, political actors there, the activity is not safe. For the other gender, it's not safe. And she used the UDA. Look at the shambolic way it was carried out. I mean, I'm aware, and you all are aware, that the activity has been called off or something, suspended, for lack of a better statement. Whatever that happened in Nairobi was suspended. Assuming that actors like the PWDs, the youth, and the women were also contestants in this, it gives you a scenario how it played. Okay. So for me, as a civic educator and an engager of issues on governance, the things that we do is first to give rights, to teach about rights, and help the members of the public to know how to engage, and not only engaging, but engaging meaningfully.
Yeah.
Because I think we engage, but we don't engage meaningfully. When talking about the budget, what contributions have we done as the fourth estate, for example, to inform the changes in the budget, in the finance bill? Because it affects us. It affects all spectrum of the society. It affects not only the politicians, it affects actually everybody. But I think what we try not doing is speaking out our voice, and not only speaking our voice, but our voice needs to be heard. But it can only be heard when you have factors, when you have evidence-based. I did an analysis the other day on basic education in the county of Nairobi. And I tell you, if I were to share with you data on basic education, in this estimate, it would worry you, notwithstanding whether you have a child in school now or not. So the point I'm trying to say is Kenyans have rights, but time has come when those rights must be now taken forward. And that's what URAIA is saying. Let's begin to engage, and engage meaningfully.
That's where the proverb comes in. Today, we are talking about promoting youth, women, persons with disability in participation in governance and electoral processes. We are joined by DanPaul Andegah. He's a civic educator at Ura Trust, and Purity Jebor, an advocate for gender justice and youthful rights. Purity, you talked about like the political party structure, and you feel, yes, the current conversation about the gender bills is putting the responsibility on political parties to ensure that there is proper and wider participation of all gender in the political party. But then we look at the leadership of those parties. What I heard you saying is the ownership of those parties, right? Because we look at it in leadership, is UDA has its owner, ODM has its owner, Jubilee has its owner, Wiper has its owner, NAC Kenya has its own. That's how we look at it. But it should be the other way around. It should be that the owners of that party are the members of the party. And if the members of the party are actually the owners of that party, then the issue of gender would not really be a bigger issue, would it be?
Yeah, because when you look at the comparison between soccer management and political parties, you see clubs are being managed by the stakeholders, and that is why they are excelling. But what happens to the political scenario? If the owners, we the Kenyans, if I'm aligned to Jubilee, UDA or Azimio, I'm supposed to be a partaker of everything that is happening. But I don't think we really are more intentional in terms of having the nitty-gritties of what our political parties are doing. And I think the main responsibility, just as the clarion called by URAIA, because Kenyans have a right, we also have a responsibility. If you say that you're a political supporter of Party A, how are you holding your political party to account? Right now we have the finance bill, and I'm just looking at it. We thought that last year was bad. I don't know what to call this year, because last year it was crazy to say the least. But I'm looking at this current finance bill. I have the new I have the new housing levy that I have to pay. I've not even planned to buy a land somewhere, but I have to finance a house for someone else to stay in. But what power do I have as an electorate to hold my party to account? What if Kenyans today wake up and write a petition to their political parties and just watch them and let them know, as you come back home to your constituency, this is what we want you to go and represent to the National Assembly? Then I think that will kind of be a turning point for our political leaders. But the place of young women to speak where again I belong, are looking at the recent election. I don't know if we all know that only 1% of young women were elected.
In which election?
2022. 1%. And that is why when you look at the current finance bill, how gender responsive is that bill? It's because the people who are supposed to inform it, to have a lens on it, are actually missing. But to what extent are we also comfortable and confident and say, if I go to Hilton Garden Inn and submit my memo, it's going to influence the revision of that bill. So I think we have so much power, but the place of apathy is also what is killing us, because we've reached a point where what we saw last year, we did memos, but the final finance acts, we did not see any changes. It was actually even made worse for us.
May I ask, are we actually in today's, I mean, just like what Eric is saying, if everybody owns the party, we know, I mean, it's not a mystery. We know that political parties in this jurisdiction are crafted around an individual. If I have a particular agenda and that agenda being voted into government, I will form a political party today. It doesn't start with ideology. So my question is, do we still, when we're looking at representation or education around the political process, knowing full well how a lot of these parties have been founded, should we still go to these parties for them to entrench these things that we are looking for? When we know full well that that is not what they've been established on. It's like banking on a cow to lay an egg. It's not going to happen. So should we still go back to them? Or is there not another thing that URAIA, and when we're talking about the people, you and me then, should be involved in?
We have to go back, and I think when we put more pressure, we saw yesterday Coca-Cola gave their ultimatum. We saw a lot of big companies giving their ultimatums into the finance bill. And that is the pressure that you can still use into the political parties.
But they have been founded on something totally different from this thing that you're talking about. People get into a political party, they coalesce around an individual and not an idea. But then we're still going back to them and asking them to do something that they were not founded to do.
So you have to go back to the drawing board, where now the civic education comes in, that when we share information and pass over knowledge on how it has to be structured, then we are going to trigger the changes that we want to see into the political parties.
So, what process do you use in ensuring that the populace is sensitized or gets to understand what it is that you're putting across?
When you say putting across, means we have an idea that we're putting across to the populace to understand. And the idea is education power, the knowledge power. On their civic, their civic rights. Basically, that's our mandate. So again, in the intro, if you got me very right, I said for a decade or so, URAIA has been civic educating members of the public on their rights. I want to believe almost 80 or thereabout, or 70% Kenyans know their right. And you can see that. When you see a traffic marshal manhandled by citizens and arrested and taken to, you've seen those incidences. It tells you some Kenyans now really understand their rights. But what is URAIA doing to take Kenyans to the next stage? The next stage of engaging is identifying platforms that Kenyans can use to engage and engage effectively. And I'll use an example that Puri has used here of the budget. That you can only change issues within the budget bill through a political party. That's what we said. That seems to be the ideal. And you can do that using a memo and thereafter a petition if the memo is not attended to. But we are saying, what is the content in that memo? So URAIA has to help you put up a memo that has verifiable data, which data you can use or any mwananchi can use to bring up a case. Now let me use a case for this year's budget and for purposes of Nairobi, since we are in Nairobi now. The budget for Nairobi is give or take, not as huge and not as small. But how many of us know
over 40 billion?
Yes. How many of us know the content in that budget? So what URAIA is doing now...
How many of us know? How many of us are interested in knowing?
Oh,
No.
Can you imagine? So if you are not even interested into knowing, then you won't even know. But ultimately, it affects you.
Yep.
So the idea begins from this budget is going to affect you and I. So the reason I must be part of it. So what URAIA does...
The reason why I ask is when we've had people who work within the civil society and the agenda they have is one which seeks not only to empower the citizenry, but seeks to also inform them through education and other processes. And I'm going to ask you the question I asked them. How involved are you with the youth? Because someone who is my age, if I do not know my rights by now, the likelihood of me getting to know them is slim, because it's not that I don't know them, I'm not interested, I don't really care. But those who are younger and who have read about it, now, through rote knowledge, they may actually understand it and they can parrot it. But do they know how their rights should impact their lives? And do they understand the responsibility they have, they, not the people they elect, to ensuring that these rights actually achieve the purpose for which they were intended? So my question, within schools, do you have clubs that deal with, or do you help, do you promote, do you talk with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development? Why am I saying this? For these rights to take root, there has to be an entire generation who actually understand it and who can apply it. I belong to the generation that was brutalized and were manhandled, so we are a little confused. We understand these rights, but we are afraid because our lived experience with government and with systems are that you have to be cautious. You need a younger generation who have been introduced to the 2010 Constitution, who need to take it up as they should to understand how it is, beyond delegating, how you ensure that that to whom your power has been delegated actually does what they do. My generation, we are hesitant.
I hear what you say. I can only sympathize, but I can tell you there's some light ahead of the tunnel. And yes, if you have been very keen, you may have seen what it is that is happening in our primary schools on areas of election. They actually use the model of IBC. Now, for them to do that, there is a very clear indication that they have been taken through the voting system, as it were. And so what URAIA is doing in partnership with other actors is basically to drive this discussion into the different levels, including the education level, including all other actors. But what URAIA does mainly is to give the information. What other levels will do without information really is not for URAIA to make any judgment. But the information that we give out, including to the fourth estate, is balanced information. What the fourth estate will do without information really
is now up to us.
It's not our business.
You had started giving us something, some info on Nairobi.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to speak to, he says, the youth, mainly the youth. The way URAIA Civic educates masses, the target mainly are the youth, the women, and the PWDs. The entry point is the youth who are in a way organized. And what is organized? The border shed, guys who sit up in some shed and do their own business, kawaida business. That's the entry point. The local mwananchi, the mama bogas who sit in Kangemi or Marikiti, that group, that organized, that is the entry point. And once we every time we have done this, we tell you that The future belongs to the youth. And they would want to see a better future. And we are glad now we are having discussion. We didn't have discussion them those days. The Lancaster House conferences, we didn't have that discussion. It was imposed. Now there's a platform for engagement. And I'm happy to say we can see success stories among the youth. At least we, the current parliament, you know the number of youth who have been elected. The question is as to whether they have brought on board the change we are looking out for is neither here nor there, and URAIA cannot be the judge. Only Kenyans can be the judge.
Yeah.
Now, speaking to the budget, again, I tell participants that for you to understand a budget, go to a sector, because budget has very many actors at sectorial levels. So for you to understand intently any budget, go at sector level. Now the budget for Nairobi, if I were to do a budget analysis for Nairobi and just pick out one sector, and I'm so interested among others who are marginalized, the children. And because Schedule 4 speaks about a role of the county government in ECD, I would want to interrogate, for example, the number of schools that have ECD classrooms vis-a-vis the number of enrollments of the children as a 2024 year. Now data has it that a projection for 2024 would have 208,17, 4 to 5 years. That you can check later. 200,817 at 2024 project. Can it be yes? Statistics will show you that.
Total enrollments or new?
Total enrollment.
Okay.
That is the number in Nairobi. I'm not talking about Kenya. That is I'm using this as a case so that we can use the same argument elsewhere. The 200,817, 4 to 5 years, both boys and girls, are supposed to be enrolled in ECD classrooms. Data has it that Nairobi, this data is from the CIDP 2023-2027, talks about 223 ECD centers. I didn't say classrooms. I said a center. So meaning one center would be Moi Primary. That's a center. It doesn't speak about how many classrooms there are inside of that center that cater for ECD. So that is gap number one. So what did I do? I signed an ATI. ATI is basically an access to justice, access to information. Tool, which is provided for by law. I said, Director Education, kindly share with me the number of ECD centers that you have in Nairobi, because I want to try to apportion this 200,817 into some units. Until today, I don't have a reply. So what does the law say? 2 weeks later, I'm supposed to petition. And that I can tell you, I will do it. As an individual, you can do the same. So that is number one on enrollment. Assuming we were to look at the number of teachers in Nairobi for ECD alone, in the CIDP 2023 to 2027, it speaks about 1,037 or so teachers. Now, when you apply the ratio of teacher-student as per the policy for basic education, it speaks to 1 to 25. You can do the mathematics. I failed mathematics miserably. So you can do the mathematics and answer. So what does URAIA do? URAIA gives you the in thing. This is what you need to consume. As to whether you are consuming it. So the most endangered part of this, the most vulnerable, the CIG, you can imagine. In that classification, we have the most needy.
Yeah.
This, children who are in difficult circumstances. In that same data. And who have not been taken care of completely. So this budget is good, but it is only good for them that imagine that it is good. So URAIA will keep on speaking to data. How can we use data to change? I am sure if you and I were to embrace reliable, authentic, available data, we can use this data to change the narrative in this country.
Do you feel, in all the years of engagement with the citizens as URAIA in the civic education, are citizens interested in the granular information, or are we interested in uchaguzi kolini? Tunachagua nani?
Eric, I can tell you for free. Citizens are interested like yesterday. But there are hurdles to effective, meaningful participation. And more specifically because of the group we are having discussion this morning about. Inability is not a key for segregation. Our brothers and sisters have been segregated. They need a level playing ground. Politics, and as it is, like Puri had said, is damn expensive. The SIG cannot meet that threshold.
But what makes it expensive?
Well,
it's not the IABC. The IABC fee is waived even for this particular group.
It's true.
The fee is waived. What makes it expensive? It's the citizens, isn't it? It's what's expected of you as a candidate. Pita hapa wacha chai, pita pale weka mafuta, pita pale nunulia vijana kitu.
So again, when you speak to Peter hapa weka chai, you remember in my intro on Utu, you are because I am. So I cannot speak to you, Eric, until you give me chai, isn't it? So we have lost it. If that be the case, so we have lost it. For only those who have chai will allow me to speak to them.
So then, and I want to come now to Purity, if these are some of the hurdles, and you've identified this is one of the hurdles, we've heard it many times before. One of the hurdles in the entry is that it's expensive. The other one is the culture and society. Looking at, you are a person with disability, you are too young, you are a woman, are you married, and all those other questions.
Social culture.
Yeah. So how do we address those ones?
Yeah, so just back to the basics on sharing information and creating awareness that is targeted. So one of the things that URAIA does is targeted civic education. So if I'm a young person of this country and I'm a woman, so the civic education will be customized that will make me understand my rights and how I should be part and parcel of governance process. If you're targeting artists, then the civic education is also customized to suit the artistic point of view, because you cannot conduct a civic education to artists or the creatives in a classroom. You also need to be creative and be in their moments. If it is poems you need to write, if it is songs that you need to compose, if it is skits that again you need to come up with that will make sense to them. Another element is the digital era of Kenya today. Young people, we are more interested into catchy and quick information. So what URAIA does, it is to simplify that civic education, so that the budget a document makes sense to me through the infographics, coming up with the popular version, but doing it up to the basic unit of ensuring that even the civic educators are people around that community that are more familiar to the language, the norms of that particular place, that civic educator is also well appreciated. But interesting thing is, from last year there was an engagement of URAIA Trust in now shaping the next generation of young children of this country, and they did partner with the music festivals where the teachers were trained on Utu, but also sponsor specific categories of that competition. So if you'll be able to attend the music festival this year, there will be a theme on Utu where it is the young children who are taking part in it.
And you've answered Ziti's question. How do you engage with the young citizens? Yes. Thank you very much for joining us. DanPaul Andegah is a civic educator with URAIA, and Purity Jebor is advocate for gender, justice and truth rights. This is the beginning of a series of conversations that we'll be having with URAIA every Thursday, looking at various aspects of civic education and awareness, promoting youth, women, and persons with disability and governance matters.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.